Hey, what's going on? This is Evie the Investor, and I'm back with my three-part mini series on how to find, analyze, and submit offers on deals. This is mainly going to be for those first-time people who don't know how to get into the space, and this can help you start to educate yourself on what to look out for. So this video is going to be all about underwriting and how to actually analyze that deal that you're looking for. So if you have not seen the first video, go ahead, go back. It's going to be up here. Just click that link to the previous video and it'll take you back there and you'll be able to actually see how to find the deal. But I'm already at the point where I've now found the deal that I like, and I'm going to go ahead and underwrite it. So the point of this video is, again, is going to be to show you guys how to analyze the deal. And when I'm pulling up the listing like this, especially, I want to be looking at only the important things here because they're going to have a lot of fluff and a lot of different things. The way Crexy has designed this is to have a lot of information in there. And not that I don't think all the information is important, but what I will say is there are some more important things in this listing here than there are not, right? So we definitely want to make sure that we're only really picking out the things that are going to be important to us. So for starters, I'm going to get right into, you can kind of see in the picture. That's one thing. I definitely want to see what it looks like. I want to have a visual of what to expect. And what I'm looking at in this picture is that there are 5 total buildings. It is next to a track, so that just might be something for, maybe based off of the picture, it looks like it's in an industrial area because they don't really build a whole lot of stuff next to tracks. Sometimes off in the countries, maybe they will build residential neighborhoods next to the tracks as well. But over time, as it grows out, then it's kind of just it happened to be there a long time ago. But this place still looks a little bit more rural based off of all the trees in the back. I'm seeing a few things here, 6 total buildings, more than likely on the site. It does look a little bit more rural, so that's going to help me out in deciding what my cap rate's going to be. Because yeah, there's a lot of trees in the back way. I mean, it's hilly, so it's a nice little probably like country area. Manchester, Georgia. I don't know if I don't know the area, but if you out there, shout out Manchester. Nice little facility over here is what it looks like. They do have security cams based off of what they're saying. They do have a looks like it's totally fenced as well, based off of what I could see. Nice units. This is a new building for sure. Let me go back real quick. Yeah, these are new buildings. Like you can see the roofs on it. That looks better. Um, those 3 buildings are probably newer. These are 2 in the back are probably older. Definitely a recent expansion going on here. Because yeah, those are probably empty and they don't even have a lock on there. So yeah, it's probably all brand new. Let's see here. Technical difficulties. Okay, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep it going. I was looking through pictures, but yeah. So important stuff on here. We're gonna pick these out real quick, right? So days on market, 60 days roughly. That's not bad at all. That's pretty common. You got to at least the first 30 days is going to be like testing the market. What does the market see? After that, it's a serious time for you to start buying. But with commercial real estate, it's a little bit longer as well because you can see, days on market could be 60 days in some residential areas, 100 days in some areas. But on commercial, it's going to be up there at least probably I would say minimum 120 before it starts moving. And that's just in every market is going to be different. So don't quote me on generalizing every market, but commercial real estate is going to move a little bit slower than residential because there's a smaller buyer pool at the end of the day. But yes, the asking price, we're not even going to worry about that right now. We'll get into that later. Cap is at a 7.6. I will say that the cap rate is going to be important because it's going to show you what the buyer thinks. I'm sorry, what the seller thinks is actually important to them. Like they're trying to get a number based off of this. So do they understand their market enough? Are they actually offering a fair ask? So these things to just keep in mind. It also has 110 units. I do like this. Everybody's going to buy differently, but me personally, I'm looking for something that's at least 100 units or more. So this is a great setup already for me. And then of course square footage. That's another thing too. So the square footage, this I would assume is going to be net rentable square footage, right? Because that's how most storage and commercial real estate investors do. you know, show off these numbers, right? So net rentable square foot is a little bit different than the total square foot, right? Because I could have a 20,000 square foot, building, but only actually renting out 13,520 of that. So just keep these things in mind that in commercial real estate and self storage, right, you're only able to make revenue based on rentable square foot. Because if the entire square foot, like maybe you're including a parking lot, it's free land off to the side, right? But you're not charging for the land. If, I mean, maybe you had parking, but in general, you're not charging for the land. You're charging for what's actually rentable, what you're actually getting revenue on. So keep these things in mind. But right now, those are my main things that I see. That you got your square footage is 13,000. That's a pretty good size facility. Your units are about 110. That's also looking good. And then cap rate 7.6. I like that. I will say, or finally our picture decides to load. I will say that might be something to consider. A little bit of capex to go. Totally fine. Pictures are going to show you that. I do see the camera. That's nice. That corner looks a little bit wicked. That looks like a warehouse probably, but yeah, that's probably that warehouse that we were looking at. So that's fine. We'll come back to pictures later, but pictures overall aren't bad. Um, oh yeah, they actually want to. Yeah, that's not bad. So you can see the pictures in here. This is not bad at all, but there are some things to consider in there. All right, so I'm liking what I'm seeing. This is, like I said, it's a nice size facility. 13,000 square foot is a good enough size for somebody to get in and be able to actually make enough. But this isn't how you analyze it. This just shows you what to expect going in, the things to consider when you're starting to do your underwriting. Now let's go ahead and deep dive into the underwriting. And before we get into the underwriting, I will preface with this. This is not my calculator. I did not create this calculator. This is actually a calculator from one of the greats, AJ Osborne at Self Storage Income. If you have not, you can take a look at their channel as well. They really help me and understand everything that I need to know. But without further ado, I do have a calculator here. It is a very useful tool that's able to actually break down all the important things when it does come to underwriting, because you need to underwrite smart in order to have a good investment. So follow along with me as we analyze this entire deal. Feel free, reverse this video, make sure that you're following along. That way you're able to keep track of everything that's going on, because I'm gonna be moving back and forth for a little bit. So I'm gonna actually pull up the OM here, which actually I pulled it up. Yep. So I got the OM here, and then we're gonna go ahead and be back and forth between the Excel sheet. All right. So follow along with what we got going on here. So the OM is going to be a very detailed version. Sometimes, everybody's different, but it should be a detailed version of what was going on the website. But it's just like a little slideshow, if you will, of every highlight of this facility and what the broker has presented for you to see. Remember that when you're looking at the OM, this is the broker presenting for the seller. So they're going to highlight everything and make it all look the very best that it can be. It's your job to go in and find any issues, or just break it down and see what's important. Why are they selling, right? So keep these things in mind as well. But we're going to go ahead and get into it here. Disclaimer, you can read it if you want. It's just a normal disclaimer. I like this. I'm going to stop before we get into the rest of it. I like this right here, the first thing. So it has a little bit more information, the kind of stuff that we were talking about, but this is super important to me, right? This price per square foot. Think of this as they're trying to tell you that this is how much they're selling it for, right? Now, again, you never have to. There's a sell price there, but you never have to pay their price. Don't ever pay their price, right? You're an investor, so you're going in, you're trying to make money on it. You can the sell price, the asking price is just a suggestion. At the end of the day, they're saying, hey, this is where we kind of want to price it at, and then there's always room to negotiate. Often, always, there's room to negotiate. Keep these things in mind, but what I do like here is that they're pricing it roughly around the $55 a square foot. So they're trying to tell us that, you got to look at it as a replacement value, right? So if I had to replace this facility and rebuild everything all over again, I would have to, in most markets, I'm probably spending minimum $100 a square foot. There's markets where you can be up to 150, maybe even 200 bucks a square foot. But this one is saying it's at 55 bucks a square foot. So that's a significant discount. Of course, if you're buying it, you're actually buying it for less than it would be to rebuild it today. That's a steal. Get in there and make it happen. You're actually able to buy it for half off at the end of the day, if that makes sense. So keep these things in mind. You're able to actually find them things out if you actually look up what's going on in your market. You see how much, if you see a brand new building going up, see how much they're building it for per square foot. Also factor in that this is a metal building. Yeah, these are metal buildings for sure, but there are other buildings out there that are not entirely metal, right? So keep these things in mind as well, but it will help you kind of gauge and kind of see where you're at and how much they're actually trying to sell it to you for. Me personally, every market is going to be different, but I do like to stick to those smaller numbers. So I'm looking for anything under 70 bucks a square foot, right? Because I'm going to be able to save significantly if I'm buying in at a lower cost basis than I would if I had to build it today. Now, I bought my facility at 38 bucks a square foot. So you're not going to see that all the time, but that's a steal. But at the end of the day, you can buy them pretty low, and they're showing you here that you can actually buy it at a significant discount. But we'll continue. Some highlights. Yep, right there. So recent expansion of 6,000 square feet. So those three buildings are brand new buildings. You can assume these kinds of things, and the more you do this, the more you'll be able to see it. But they're gonna also tell you, so they're not hiding it. Now, one thing that I will say is, since there was a recent expansion, you have to factor in that there's also an occupancy loss. So they may have had 100, 100 yeah, they may have had 100% occupancy with, call it 50 units, and then they added in, however many more, 6,000 square feet, right? That's another, or actually they were at 110. So let's say they were at 50 units before, and then they added in another 6,000, which ended up being another 50 units, basically, right? Now they went from 100% occupancy to 50%, right? So keep that in mind as well. And then on top of that, not only did they add 6,000 square feet to their individual facility, but they added 6,000 square feet to the entire market as a whole. So the area saturation goes up a little bit, right? So how much did they just saturate the area? Granted that this is a small, location. This is a small town, right? It's not necessarily, New York City, right? But it is a small area. So the area saturation might actually have a significant cost by adding 6,000 square feet. If the entire market was, the 13,250 or whatever, or actually, let's break it down. If the entire market was 10,000 square feet total and they added 6,000, they just added 60% of the entire market. And that's a lot, because then can the market sustain that? Can it absorb that? But if the market was 100,000 square feet total and they added 6,000 square feet, I mean, they only added 6%. That's not a big deal, right? So just keep these things in mind. And this is just more things that you're going to have to do when you're actually looking to analyze. But I'll continue. It does have that warehouse. So, potential revenue potential. So they're telling you this is pro forma right now. They're telling you, yeah, there's nobody in there, but you could get that. Keep that in mind. It is remotely managed. The only way to do self storage, especially small facilities like this, remotely manage it. Fully fenced. Okay, cool, cool, cool. So we can see what's going around. You can actually see the fence. They got, a little map. That's cool. Um, but so they got some pictures in here. That's cool to see as well. Just, it helps you out to kind of know what you're buying there. They do have an automatic gate, which I love to see that as well. They've already spent that kind of money to make these things happen, and you don't have to do it when you're getting into it. So that's another thing I'm looking at. In all these pictures, I'm looking at the capex and what I'm going to have to realistically spend if I can see what's going on. I will say, don't entirely estimate capex on only what you see in a picture. You need to get out there and get some eyes on as well too, because there are going to be things that you see out there that are going to be like, oh, I didn't even see that in the picture, or they took the picture on this angle, right? So just keep these things in mind where they might be cutting out some important information, but you can see right here. I think we saw this corner earlier with that camera. It's coming apart, so that's going to be some capex. You're going to have to fix that siding or put up a new piece to of course clean that up. You don't want hazardous things, or not hazardous, but you don't want hazards in general. where somebody might clip that. I don't know. Anything can happen, right? It could be a liability. But I do like that gate with the keypad. I do see this here. Maybe a little landscaping needs to happen, so just keep that in mind with your expenses. You will have some landscaping going on, and this is in Georgia, so I don't know how far north or south it is, but I would assume that it's not going to be snowing all the time over there. So just keep that in mind. There's other things like that that you'll have to consider when you start getting into the expenses. But for the most part, it looks like a well kept facility. The drive aisles look good. Looks like it was probably recently graveled. And there's not a whole lot of overgrowth in these areas as well either. So we're looking really good. And you can even see it here. Like there's barely a little bit. So you might need to get like a weed whacker or something like that. But not even a big deal from just the pictures. Of course, get out there and re-verify, reconfirm these things. Um, yeah, more of that. I'm okay. This is what I'm looking for. Cool. So let's get into it. The underwriting, the most important piece of everything, is gonna make or break your deal. It's gonna show you exactly what's going on with it. So we have here the current 2025 projected. Of course, so they probably listed it because they listed as projected because they hadn't finished the year, of course, but they probably had a number or so, and then they just times it by however many. So they projected out the rest of the year. So keep that in mind. A lot of this is also going to be right here. You see where it says lease up to 80% to 90% with the 5% rate increase. All of these things, keep in mind that they're showing you some pro forma numbers because they don't have it there. So I will say this one thing, right? I hate seeing pro forma. I really do. Because brokers love to sell you pro forma and they're like, hey, buy this property because it has this potential. But they're trying to sell it to you as if the potential was already realized. And I'm like, I have to buy it and then realize the potential, but I'm not buying a property on tomorrow's value. I'm buying it because it has the value, but I'm going to buy it based off of today for tomorrow. Does that make sense? So definitely do not pay for pro forma. Buy based on it, but don't pay for it. So getting into it, you got some income. Ooh, you got some income right here. Again, this could be projected number, so keep that in mind. It does show you right here other income warehouse space, so that's definitely a projection because it looked like it was empty and it was saying potential warehouse. So definitely some pro forma going on in here with the total gross there and a little bit of a breakdown. They got some expenses. I don't know if these are real expenses or not. It's just showing insurance with some flat numbers. This is showing management. Okay, real estate taxes. That's also, that's a pretty even number. I'm sure it's not entirely even. Um, Boots on the ground and maintenance. Okay, they got boots on the ground and they got management. Okay, so that's some expenses that we could probably be working around. This is why I'm looking at this right now because there's some things that we could probably take out um, and I'll get into that here as well too. Is like they're going to tell you their expenses, but I would consider their expenses only for just looking at it. But when you underwrite based off of your expenses, right? Because everybody's going to have different expenses. So keep that in mind. Definitely don't just go based off of it and say, oh, yeah, it's going to work. The numbers do this. And I'm like, well, if I'm buying today, for instance, I'm buying off of if I paid the full 745 for this property, right? The taxes are going to be whatever the tax is going to be. Let's just say the real estate taxes go from 3,000 to now 35 or 4 because I purchased it. These taxes are based off assessed value of when the owner had purchased it and how the taxes have kind of like, incrementally gone up. But when you purchase it, they're going to recalibrate everything and then they're going to do a new number based off of the taxes, and that's what you have to pay. So keep that in mind. Do not underwrite based off of this number. Underwrite off of a future number, of course. But there are expenses in here that we can see. We're going to follow along right here. It does show your NOI of 56,000. So at 56,000 earlier, it showed us a cap rate of 7.6, if I remember correctly. Yep, 7.6. So this cap rate of 7.6, I'm gonna show you something real quick. Follow along here because this is the most important piece of commercial real estate, right? The NOI. To get the value of the property, you need to have a simple calculation. It's going to be NOI divided by cap rate gives you the purchase value or the value of the property. So we're going to take in 56,000 right into our calculator, divided by 7.6%, the cap rate. It's going to give you 736,000. So that's what they're kind of trying to say. It's around roughly around that area, based off of these numbers. Now we understand also this is a projection. So if we took out that $12,000 worth of additional income for the year, then it's not necessarily worth 736, right? And I'm not going to break all of that down today. I'm just trying to show you that that's how you actually get the value of the property. Now, the cap rate, you might ask, is the capitalization rate. So it basically says if I bought this property full cash today, what is the return for me? What is my ROI? And it could be where you buy it for 100,000 and it's a 10% cap rate, right? Where that's a good spread where you're going to make some money, and it does depend on your markets. So the higher the cap rate, meaning like 10%, that's based off of a higher risk, so you get a better return. The lower cap rate, a 5 cap, is a lower return, but it's a better appreciation play. So those are things to keep in mind as well. But I'll keep it going. Yes. So this is going to be the important piece. And let's actually go ahead and get into the underwriting. So we're going to keep these things in mind. I'm going to start to plug them into the calculator. Actually, let me get that. So that was a 6, 8, 10, 6, 10, 10, 40. It was something like that. 6, 8, 10, 10. Let's see here. 6, 8, 10, 6, 10, 10, 40. Got it. I missed the 6. 6, 8, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep. Okay. Oh, I'm already on there. Duh. Here we go. And then we got 10, 10, 10, 20, 15, 20. Here we go. I think that was right. 15, 20, 25. Let me see here. Actually, it's on there. 10, 10, 10, 20, 15, 20, 25. Yep. Okay. And then a 1, 13, 64. 1, 22, 8, 1. And lastly, because I did see that, 1,000 already. Okay. And then we got 66, 50, 91. Okay, actually, here, let's break this down, because this is a super important metric. So, what you just saw me do all the way here was going to be I was inputting the information. Okay, this is key information. You want to make sure that the size is broken out for you. That way, in here, it's going to populate the different sizes, right? And it's going to actually show you the exact amount of units that you have and your net rentable square foot. So that is net rentable that they're actually trying to express, from the OM. It even shows you here square foot per unit and the total rentable square foot for each of these units. So you see exactly what's going on, right? Monthly rate is where we were. I'm going to stop here because I want to make sure that it's actually expressed properly. So for starters here, right, underneath this price column, it's going to show 66, 70, so on and so forth, right? This price right here is total pro forma. These numbers are a lot higher than where they could be, right? And I know that because when I look at it here, it shows average actual price. So make sure you're looking at and you're underwriting based off of the actual price. Do not go off of the pro forma price. So the average actual, for instance, where this is 66, This one's 50.91, right? That's a $20 difference. So when you're underwriting and you're over here putting in 70 and it's not, that's gonna blow back on you real quick. So make sure you're on the average actual price. I'll put it in exact 50.91. What was that? I lost it. Okay. 5606 and 0. Yep. Now I'm gonna go back here as well. So they have 0 here because on the average actual price right now, they're not getting anything. I think that's the wrong answer. They should not be doing that. They should just keep the 0 at the occupied square footage, right? Where they don't have anybody in there actually occupied. So keep the 0 over there, but don't put 0 on the price, or the average actually, because like, you know what I'm saying? Like, why would you put it at 0? So I'm gonna do some quick, this is a 6 by 20. So that's about the same size as, I want to say this 10 by 15. 10 by 15. Yeah. So it's a slight bit smaller than the 10 by 15 by 30 square foot. So if the 10 by 15 is 93.50, let's shoot for what we could realistically do today, because they're also showing on the price that you can get it to 95, which if you can get it to 95, maybe pro forma is actually correct. But let's just say, let's say 85 for the 6 by 20, and then 93.50, what's going on today. All right. Yeah, that way we're a little bit, more conservative on the numbers, because you never want to overestimate and then again just have yourself in a bad position. And it was like 99.35, maybe, if I remember correctly. 99.38. Okay. So I got all of my information over here. One thing that I will do just to help yourself out, if you have a calculator just like this one, what you'll want to do, here is this right off the rip, and then we'll go in here and we'll put in our stabilized, because we're not necessarily doing any changes. If you are going to make changes, that's totally fine, because you can buy a facility and you can like rip out walls and enlarge units or even make them smaller, put up partitions. So that's totally fine. If you're going to do that, you can always make that change over here, but this is just an easy way to do it. And then we're going to go in here, we're going to put in the actual price here that they want. So, I'm sorry, the price. So 66, 70, 80. Not ChatGPT. Great tool, by the way. Let's see here. Where was I at? 66, 70, 80. And then these two are 95. And then that's 1,000. Okay. So this is where they're saying that you could realistically get. Since I have not done a whole lot of market research right now, I'm just showing you some quick underwriting. You can actually plug in these numbers and you can go out and do your own underwrite or your own market research to make sure that these numbers actually can stick. Um, they didn't really move all the numbers. They only moved the 8 by 10s. So if they have one 6 by 10 that is actually occupied and paying $66, that's showing you that if they can get $66 on the 6 by 10, they can definitely get a little bit more. That's why they pushed that 8 by 10 up to $70. So keep that in mind as well. That's just a pro forma. They still have to actually test it, of course, but that's a totally fine, fair assumption that they can get. All right. So current occupancy, this is going to be super important. Since we know for a fact that there is nobody in, let's see, actually, they might have already said it. Let's see. Yeah, they do have it right here. So we'll go ahead and we'll just add it all up because there's nobody in this 6 by 20 and there's nobody in the warehouse. And if this is super important, right? So they're talking about net rentable square foot, which they're going to include the warehouse. And that's a pretty big size. So it's a part of their net rentable. So they probably have, 40 by 25 is 1,000 square feet actually. So 1,000 of those square footage is actually going to be the warehouse itself. So once that income is gone, if it's not there, right, that's a huge amount of income. So remember these numbers when you're looking at the pro forma of what it could potentially do. If you lose a tenant like that, it's a huge number to lose every month. So total occupancy right now, and they also have it split up different ways. So right, you can see the occupancy by percent, meaning the percent of the units that are actually filled. And so, for instance, there's a 6 by 10. There's only one of those, and it's full, 100% occupancy, and so on and so forth. The area occupancy, very very similar, right? It's the area, so that area. The economic though is a little bit different, and this is the important piece that people need to know before you go in and buying it, right? So you got the 6 by 10 where it is occupied, somebody is in there, and economic occupancy is going to tell you if people are actually paying or are they paying the full amount that you want, because it's not always about a delinquency, as it could also potentially be about the fact that maybe, for instance, on this next one actually, where they want to raise it up to about $70, and they're telling you that you could probably raise it up to $70, but they're only collecting $50. So the economic right here shows a 61.54%, right? So they're not collecting what they could fully collect it, right? Another thing here is you'll see is that they also have 84% of those 8 by 10s occupied. So that's another reason why the economic occupancy has dropped. Because if they were collecting 100% of all the money, then that would still be at 100% based off of the economic, but they're not. So keep those things in mind. You'll know exactly the health of this facility just by looking at the economic. If they're supposed to make 10,000 and they're only collecting 50% economic occupancy, and that's, they just need to tighten up those collections and do better at the end of the day. But it helps you out as a prospective buyer to know exactly what's going on at that facility. But we're going to break down this occupancy real quick to be able to plug that in. So that's 100, and you got 84, 62, 51, 56, 0, 45, 45. That's surprising that the bigger units aren't actually, or actually they probably just rebuilt some bigger units. That's another thing, right? They just had an expansion. So I'm not going to say that. So my number, I got 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So by 7, right, their total occupancy right now at this facility is 54.51%. All right. Now, again, granted, they just went through an expansion. So I am not about to, you know, I'm not about to pass up just because they have a low occupancy. It's just you got to understand that since you already know for a fact they went into a recent expansion, if you're going to take on a facility like this, you have to do the lease up. Totally fine. As long as you know that going in, it's totally fine. So 54% occupancy is going on. We want to stabilize it over here up to the right at 85%. So keep that in mind. Expense ratio. This is a smaller facility. So I run my expenses, like I said, I'm going to run it based off of my expenses, not based off of theirs. So we will use theirs as a frame of reference, but we will not make that off, make this off of there. So gross income right now is 69, or gross potential, because it is not effective gross potential. So 69,432, and right now they're spending roughly 12,000. So we're going to do 12,552. This is also just really quick math. 12,552 over 69 432. And then if you need to do it, go ahead, multiply that by 100. You're looking at an 18% expense ratio. Now, that's the beauty of self-storage, that expenses can be low. I will add in here that they actually have a couple of expenses that I would actually be able to realistically get rid of in here, because I would say management we could get rid of, depending on what they're doing. Why do you need a manager, right? If you're going to be able to have it as remote, access or controlled, if you will, you don't have to necessarily be there to manage that. So there is no need for a manager. Now there are other ways to do that. I'm not going to get into this video, but there are other ways to manage it remotely and still have an expense that you have to pay, but there should be no management going on. Boots on the ground and maintenance does make sense, and they did kind of put a flat number here, so they might just be paying like a maintenance guy to come out and check on it, but keep that in mind as well. And then of course the rest of these numbers can definitely fluctuate whenever you take it on. It's not your expenses. So they're running at an 18% expense ratio based off of these projections here. I would say that's a fair assumption based off of a small facility. As the bigger you go on the facilities, your expenses should rise significantly with the increase of the facility's price and the facility size. But the smaller the facility, you can actually kind of get away with these lower expense ratios, because if you set it up to man itself, or to if you set it up to unmanned, if you set it up as an unmanned facility, you can actually cut a lot of costs. So this 18% I think is fair, but I'm still going to underwrite a little bit higher just because I don't feel comfortable running it that low on my underwriting. So I'm going to run it still at a 25%. I think that's a fair number. And actually, annual right there is at 13 and theirs was at 12. So I'll take that any day. Uh, I want to make sure that my number's a little bit more conservative. That way, we're good. We're not going in blind. But of course, you can always change this up. Do more research. Don't just go real quick numbers. I'm just kind of going off of what I should expect that's going on. So this gives me an actual NOI right now of 40,000, which is $16,000 lower than what the seller's broker and then them are trying to actually represent. Obviously, they're also showing and trying to represent that projected income from the warehouse. So keep that in mind. But this is more than likely what's actually going on the grounds today, is roughly at 40,000 now with the new added um, units. They were probably a lot less than they were before, but just things to consider when you're underwriting. Now, off to the right, of course, we're running it today at 25, but we want to also run it very efficiently. So here we are running it at 20. I'm going to keep it roughly around there. And then, of course, I did have my occupancy that I kind of skipped over. I have it today at 54%. I want to get it to 85%. And you might say, well, why not 100? So I never want to shoot for 100, because if I'm shooting for 100% occupancy, that means I'm full. And now I don't have any supply to be able to sell to a customer. And if I'm at 100, more than likely it means I just need to raise my rents so that I can get people out who don't necessarily want to pay a little bit more, right? So keep these things in mind, that my prices are probably too low if I'm at 100. So I don't want to shoot for 100 in any way, shape, or form. I wanted a roughly 85%. That way I always have something to sell. But everything else looks good there. We could potentially get it over here based off of the rent increases. And so this is showing you on both sides, of course, your current and then your stabilized. So we're not going to get into the deal structure, because that's probably the next important piece that you want to make sure that you actually consider. So the purchase price, and I'm gonna go back and forth here, right? So we put in all this information here, and we have our NOI. If we do buy it at that 7.6, which I still think would be it would be a fair estimate to assume that you could probably do a 7.5 or up on the cap rate. I would probably go at 8 cap in this market, because it looks a little bit more rural, or maybe even a little bit higher than an 8. It just depends on the market when I actually get out there and see what's going on. But I think an 8 cap would be fair to assume in this scenario. So I'm not looking at, instead of 745, I'm looking at the 500,000 down there. So I'm going to submit this and run the numbers as if it was a $500,000 purchase. That's 500,000. Okay. Now CapEx, I do want to make assumptions just because you never know what's going on. So let's just say that CapEx are maybe going to run us 5% or less. It is a newer facility, so I want to do keep that in mind. It is a newer expansion of the facility, so those buildings are already in good shape. You may not even need to spend that amount. So let's actually go back and let's do 2.5. Let's do 2.5. There might be some things that you're gonna have to go in and update, things to consider. But 12.5 sounds good to me. On a facility this small, you shouldn't have to spend a lot because you already have an electric gate going. You have cameras already there. You might have to do some landscaping and potentially replacing that side that we saw earlier that was a little bit warped. So keep that in mind. Plus, we're also, budgeting any extra contingency here just in case something else pops up. So I will stick with that, and then I'm also going to run my closing costs at 2% as well. Actually, let's just say 20,000. 20,000 sounds roughly about right and what you could spend on this. Definitely run numbers, or if you want to get more specific, you can always look at a CD, a HUD statement. Those are going to be the ones that show you the breakdown of everything that you're going to have to pay because every lender is going to be different, right? The closing cost is going to be lender specific, title company specific. Everybody has fees. Keep that in mind. Do not just do the number like this, but this is going to just be helpful for a quick reference of a closing cost in that statement. So you should realistically be all in 532 down there on a $500,000 purchase price. That sounds pretty correct to me. And then I do like this structure right here. So this is going to be an important piece that I want to kind of stop and make sure that we break down. Right here, I've actually modeled out. I've actually modeled out right there that down payment is a 10%. And you might say, okay, well, where would I get a 10% down payment? You could potentially do owner financing, but that's not even what I'm going to model out here today. I'm actually going to show you could get into a property like this leveraging the SBA loan. Now, SBA loan is going to allow you to get in at 10% down, where they're going to cover 90% of it. You bring the other 10%. So of that 10%, of course, off of a $500,000 purchase price, you're looking at 50,000. Granted, with all the extra costs and different things like that, it shows 82.5. That's still a little bit wrong. My calculator might just be off, but it may just be helping you out. You can see up here what it's kind of actually calculating, but you're looking at roughly 50 down, and then you'll be able to get into a property like that. So keep that in mind when you are looking in. You can definitely run this off of a conventional if you want. I'm just going to use and model the SBA because I already know and will work with a lender that uses the SBA loan. So anytime I'm looking to purchase, I know for a fact I can go out there and get it 10% down. So your loan amount should be 450. At the end of the day, you got interest right here. Interest rates have been a little bit higher right now, so I'm going to do a little bit worst case scenario estimates for a newbie beginner getting in with the new LLC, just walking in to go get the SBA loan. You might get hit with a little bit higher of interest rate. And commercial real estate has been a little bit on the higher end right now, where for the SBA loan, you could probably get about 8% right now if you have a good enough credit. Maybe at least a 600 plus or whatever they're looking for. I'm not really sure. So just roughly around that 8%, and then the length of the mortgage that should be fine there. So you're looking at right now the breakdown of your principal statements, right? Or your principal payments, I should say, would be 6,155 here, and then your interest payments are going to be 36,000 for the whole year, based off of what's going on. So total P and I, or your total debt service down there, is going to be 42,000. So I want to also stop right there because on the SBA loan, and you can kind of already see it's already negative right now. You might be like screaming, "Oh, that's a bad deal! Don't do it!" Right? But on the SBA loan, they also do have something that they offer is called interest only payments. So you could actually get away with for the first 12 months of that loan only paying interest only. So it's going to help a newbie because you're looking at these interest payments that are 36,000. That's only $3,000 a month. So now your debt service goes from being where it says total yearly debt service, it goes from 42,155. So it goes from, oops, yeah, there we go, 150. So 42,155 divided by 12 is $3,500 every month. and it goes from that to actually being $3,000 every month. So you actually save $512 by going interest only. So now I can add back in that $500, and now I cash flow about 300 bucks. So it's not a terrible thing at all, but I could buy it cash flowing today. Granted, I want to have a little bit more reserves walking into it. If my margin is that low, any one expense could definitely take me for that month. So I definitely don't want to make sure. I want to make sure that I do have a little bit more reserves off to the side. But keep in mind that when you're running your numbers like that, if you kind of see this kind of stuff as well, like remember, you can go out and get interest only loans, or you could leverage different types of creative financing to actually mitigate what you see here. And then the last piece that I want to touch on the underwriting is going to be your return metrics, right? When you're finally stabilized and everything looks good, that process may take 3 to 6 months to actually stabilize it, right? But once you're finally done and you have what you want, at the end of the day, the investment is paid off, as you can see, because now you're going to be cash flowing when you actually get all of those numbers up to where you want, right? You're now cash flowing $3,000 every month. You're doing really good where you're making roughly $40,000 a year, and your debt service right there, you're touching on a 195 or 194. So that's definitely something that you want to keep in mind, that lender will be looking at the debt service, and they're most likely going to be looking at least a 1.1 entry on most of these DSCR type of loans. But that's a great debt service, so you could actually refi out and keep a little bit extra, right? What you'll be able to see here, so we bought it at an 8 cap originally, worth 500,000, and here it shows that it's now worth $1 million. So we actually doubled the value of this facility, meaning when we want to actually exit on this deal, that could have been roughly in about 6 months. You can exit on the deal. You can actually cash out roughly half of that. Now, you're not going to cash out all of that, because every lender, most of the time they're going to cap you around 70 to 8% or 70 to 80%. So on $1 million, you're only going to be able to pull out roughly that 800,000. You pay off your $500,000. Let's say it was 530. I forgot, right? But let's just say 550. For extra costs and that kind of stuff, you're still cashing out 250,000. You can go take that money and go do something else with it, right? You go buy another facility, scale to the next one, because you understand and you have an idea of what this actual. You have the proof of concept, so you're actually able to go out and do these kinds of things. But anyways, that is how I underwrite it. I hope that this has value to you and that you actually understand it. And again, if you got confused at any point, feel free to just reverse it. Make sure that you actually get the in-depth understanding of what's going on here. This is a full breakdown on how to actually underwrite a facility. So thanks for watching. Let me know down in the comments if you actually enjoyed this video and if you want to see more like this. I'm going to be putting out videos all the time that kind of help new investors actually understand the processes and concepts of what it takes to actually purchase, to find, to analyze, and to actually offer on these deals. So this was part 2. Stay tuned for part 3 in the next video, and I appreciate you watching.